The SRX might be making a comeback in 2024, and Shane Van Gisbergen has a new sponsor. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that haven't revealed all this week. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brendan Poole's 2024 CW Sun scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. This is a tribute scheme that Brendan Poole had, basically the DC Solar scheme he had back in 2016. Well, let's be honest and real, he should have won that race, and NASCAR made a BS call there. Nonetheless, looks really good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2024 Jordan brand scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. Honestly, this looks pretty good in my opinion. Like the colors on it, I've always been a big fan of the Jordan brand schemes. This one's no exception. I think it looks really awesome. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sam Mayer's 2024 Huck scheme that we're going to see in 2 races in 2024. Not much has changed from last year's scheme, to be honest, but it's really cool to see the Hucks is back to sponsor Sam Mayer for a couple races in 2024. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Sieg's 2024 North County scheme, or North Country scheme, that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. These scheme's all right in my opinion, not perfect, but glad to see a new sponsor working with Kyle Sieg. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ros Chastain's 2024 Jockeying Fishing scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. This is basically the same scheme that we saw with Daniel Suarez, it's just now a different number with Ros Chastain. It looks great though. Once again, Kyle Sykes doing a really good job on his paint schemes. This looks really awesome and good, to be honest with you. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Blaine Perkins' 2024 Ollie scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. I've always been a big fan of the Ollie Bargain Outlet schemes. This looks really great, and I'm definitely looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brendan Queen's 2024 BRC scheme that we're going to see at North Wilkesboro in his Truck Series debut. I love this paint scheme. This looks really good, and I think that Tricon did a really great job overall. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2024 Tootsie scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. I absolutely love this paint scheme. There's a lot of great colors. The purple looks really amazing. I think they absolutely did a really great job in this, and I'm definitely looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. I think it looks awesome. I think it looked great. And like I said, I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend. I think it looks amazing. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Talladega purse money for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockus puts out the purse money. And according to him, for the Cup race, it's $8,234,125. And for the Xfinity Series race, it's $1,479,274. That's a pretty good purse money for this weekend. I think it's pretty good. And again, you have a lot of money coming in for Cup, obviously with the Charters, which we're going to talk about later in this episode. Xfinity's also got some pretty good purse money. Overall, it's pretty good, and that, in my opinion, is some solid and pretty good purse money for this weekend, especially if you're a fan. It's pretty awesome that the purse money is a little up for this weekend. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about RTIC Coolers. As it was announced a couple days ago that RTIC Coolers will sponsor Sam Mayer for 4 races in 2024. RTIC Cooler is one of the biggest cooler companies out there, and we've been seeing Sam Mayer over the course of the last few months pick up a lot of sponsorships. Huck's, of course, sponsored for 2 races, and now RTIC Coolers is coming back to sponsor him for 4 races in the 2024 season. I think they're going to be sponsored maybe this weekend, if I'm not mistaken, and the other 3, I think one of them, it's not Indianapolis, but there's a couple other races that they're going to sponsor him throughout 2024. It's really good and pretty exciting to see that Sam Mayer has a new sponsor for this weekend. Glad to see RTIC Coolers joining for this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mark Martin. As it was announced yesterday that Mark Martin will be waving the green flag for the Cup Series race at Talladega Superspeedway. Mark Martin, of course, one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. Glad to see that he's going to be back in the sport. And I think it's pretty cool that they're continuing to bring a lot of legends of the sport back, do some really cool things to be honorary people in the sport. Really exciting stuff, and I'm happy to see that Mark Martin once again is back to wave the green flag. Of course, I think he's going to do an excellent job doing it, but nonetheless, really excited for him and glad to see that he'll get the chance and opportunity to wave the green flag at Talladega this weekend. I think he'll do a really exciting and great job overall on that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about TPain. As it was announced on Tuesday that TPain will be performing at the Confluence Festival at St. Louis during the Gateway Weekend. The Confluence Festival is a massive festival. It's going to be going on big and rich. I think Riley Scott or Riley Green is going to be performing, and I think Ludacris is also going to be performing at the Confluence Festival as well. And now you've got TPain who's going to be joining as well. I love when tracks do really cool things like this where they have these festivals and where they basically bring a lot of these artists out because it makes the event around the racetrack a lot bigger. And having TPain coming out, I think that it's really exciting because TPain is one of the legends of the R&B and rap game. It's really amazing to see that he's going to get the chance and opportunity. And I'm very happy to see that TPain will get to perform at the Confluence Festival, which I think he'll do a really good job overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Tuesday, Martin Truex Jr. has a new tire changer. The guy's name is Mike Luria. Mike Luria had been working with Ricker Racing the last couple of years on the number 51 car for Justin Haley, and now he'll be rejoining Martin Truex Jr. One of the reasons they're making this change is because Martin Truex Jr. had some tire issues this past weekend at Texas Motor Speedway, especially on the right rear, because the tires were loose, and they went a lap or 2 laps down at one point because of it, and they lost their chance and opportunity to go to victory lane, though they're able to bounce back, I believe, and finish inside the top 20. But they need to make some changes, otherwise they were going to be in a lot of trouble going forward because Martin Truex Jr., we could hear on the radio, was really, really frustrated. And we want to see him do a lot better because he needs to make the playoffs this year because he struggled at the end of last season. And they need to make these crew changes. I think it makes a lot of sense to make this move. Hopefully we do see Mike Luria do a good job to really help Martin Truex Jr., especially on pit road going forward because we don't want to see more issues between them going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about David Starr. As it was announced on Monday that David Starr will drive a 66 for MBM Motorsports this weekend at Talladega. David Starr has made select starts so far, one I believe coming earlier this year at Daytona, but unfortunately I think they DQ'd to get into the event. And he's of course driven the number 14 for SS Greenlight Racing in a few races so far this season. David Starr has made many starts with MBM Motorsports in the fast. In fact, I think he drove the 66 car at Martinsville a couple weekends ago, and now he's going to get the chance and opportunity to drive with them at Talladega. Now obviously because MBM has not run a majority of the season so far in the Xfinity Series, they will have to qualify their way in later tomorrow. Hopefully David Starr has a chance and opportunity to do that because if he can make the show, I think that the team has the speed to contend, especially since MBM's had some good speed on super speedways in the past. So we'll see what MBM can do, and we'll see if David Starr can make the field this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about BJ McLeod. As BJ McLeod confirmed on Monday that he'll be driving the 78 for Live Fast Motorsports this weekend at Talladega. This will be the second race that BJ McLeod's team, Live Fast Motorsports, has raced in the Cup Series. This will be the third race they attempted. They obviously tried to make the Daytona 500 earlier this year, but unfortunately they failed to qualify for the event by just a fraction of an inch. I think BJ McLeod, if they have the speed they had at Daytona, I think they have a really good chance and opportunity to run up front. Because I think they had really good speed during the duels. In fact, they were one of the fastest cars on the racetrack at one point, and I think that BJ will have the pace and speed to contend with them at Talladega, if of course they bring the same speed they had at Daytona. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited to see that BJ McLeod is back at Talladega. I think he's going to do a really exciting and great job with the organization. Looking forward to seeing him back on the racetrack at Talladega this upcoming weekend. I think he'll do a really good job with Live Fast Motorsports. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Coyne Racing. As Dale Coyne Racing has announced their lineup for this weekend at Long Beach. So Jack Harvey is going to drive the 18 and Nolan Siegel will drive the 51 this weekend. Originally, a lot of people thought that Jack Harvey was going to be in the number 51 this weekend because it was announced on his birthday, and a lot of people thought that he would be driving the 51. But basically, they cleared up the confusion, and Jack Harvey, who is going to run a majority races with Dale Coyne Racing this season, will be in the 18 for a majority of the year. And then you got Nolan Siegel, who's going to be in the 51. Nolan Siegel did run the Thermal Club race, and I believe Nolan Siegel has quite a few races scheduled for the season. I don't think the Indy 500 is one of those races that he has scheduled for the year, but Nolan Siegel will also be competing for the Rookie of the Year honors, though I do think he's also still at this point competing in Indy Lights. It's a very interesting choice to bring Nolan Siegel back. I think he did a solid job, honestly, at Thermal, and I think it makes a lot of sense to bring him back. I think it's a very solid lineup for them this weekend, and nonetheless, very happy and glad to see that they are bringing him back for the weekend. I think Jack will do a solid job, and I think Nolan will do a pretty good job this weekend with the organization at the Long Beach Grand Prix. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ros Chastain. As it was announced yesterday that Ros Chastain will be driving the 92 for DGM Racing for 5 races in 2024. Now, originally, Ros Chastain was going to run at Dover next weekend, but the reason that Ros Chastain is not going to be running at Dover is because that is a Dash for Cash race. That is, of course, the final race for the Dash for Cash. And Cup Series drivers, regardless of experience in the Cup Series, are not eligible to run the Dash for Cash races. So the races that Ros Chastain is going to run this year is still to be determined at this point. But it makes a lot of sense to bring Ros Chastain back to DGM Racing, considering the fact that, one, I think DGM Racing is still trying to build up their program, and two, Ros Chastain has driven for DGM Racing many times in the past. And he's actually gotten some really good runs and performances with that team. I go back to Coda a few years ago where that number 92 car was up front and contending for a potential victory at one point in the race. And I do think that you're going to see Ros Chastain have the pace and the speed to be up front on a pretty consistent basis if they bring the speed we've seen them have before. Because we've seen Kyle Weatherman have top 15 and top 20 performances, but the 92 car obviously is in a little bit of issues when it comes to owner's points at the moment, which is another reason why they're bringing Ros Chastain back. I think he's going to do a really good job, though, with DGM, and I think he's going to be able to get the best out of equipment. We'll see how he ends up doing, but I do think he'll have a very solid and good performance with DGM Racing in the 5 races that he's able to run. I don't think he's going to win, but I do think he'll have some pretty good performances with DGM Racing in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Theo Poer. As it was announced just this morning that Theo Poer will be driving the 6 for Arrow McLaren this weekend at Long Beach, making his IndyCar debut. The reason that Theo Poer will be driving the 6 car this weekend is because David Malukas is still not cleared to race in IndyCar at the moment. They were expecting that David Malukas was going to be back this weekend after recovering from surgery after crashing on a bicycle, but he still has not fully recovered from that surgery, and they're saying it's taking a lot longer than expected, which is why Theo's getting the chance and opportunity. Theo Poer has been a standout in Formula 2, and I think he's won some Formula 2 races in the last couple of years. That's why they're bringing him in. Now, if Theo does really, really well, when you look at Prema Racing especially, you can see Prema looking to go get him if he performs really, really well with Arrow McLaren, considering Arrow McLaren's had the pace and speed. And I think Callum Ilott had done a really good job with this organization as well when he drove for them. So I think that Theo has a decent chance and opportunity to run really well. I don't think he's going to go out there and win, for example, but I do think he'll have a solid chance and opportunity to be competitive. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to seeing him have the chance and opportunity to drive with this organization this weekend, and I think he'll do a really good job with them this weekend at Long Beach. It's exciting stuff. I'm really looking forward to it, and again, very happy and glad to see that Theo Poer will be driving the number 6 for Arrow McLaren at Long Beach. I think he'll do a really good job with the organization this week at the Long Beach Grand Prix. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Threei. Now, there was a report that came out from Joseph Wrigley that Threei is going to sponsor Kyle Busch for only one race in 2024, and that is going to be the championship race at Phoenix. We obviously knew that Threei was going to be back with Richard Childress Racing for at least some races in 2024, but according to reports, it's because of the political environment is the reason why they're only going to be sponsoring this team for one race in the 2024 season. First of all, glad to see Threei is back working with Kyle Busch and Richard Childress Racing this season, but it's a shame that they have had to cut back on their sponsorship with them this year because of the political environment. To me, I think it needs to get solved really, really quickly so we can see Threei sponsor more races. But at least on a positive, Threei is going to be sticking around at least for one race in 2024 because the more spots that Kyle Busch has, the better it is for him. Obviously, I think Zone's kind of taken over that majority sponsorships. I think Threei sponsored last year for the most races in 2024, so I think Zone has kind of taken over that leadership role as the leader sponsor for this season. I'm glad to see that they're back for 2024, and overall, it's good to see that Threei is at least back for one race this year. Granted, I wish they were here for more races in the 2024 season, and maybe next year they'll get the chance and opportunity to sponsor for more races. But hey, at least for this season, they're back for one race. I wish it was more, but at least they're back for one race in the 2024 season. Glad to see that. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Texas TV ratings. According to Adam Stern, FS1 got 2.31 million viewers for the Cup race at Texas. There's no direct comparison to 2023 as the race obviously was on USA and it was in the fall, which I think that race got a little over 2 million viewers on USA Network, but it is down from the 2018 race, which I think had 2.8 to 2.9 million viewers, which honestly, for an F1 race, FS1 race, that is not that bad. And having 2.3 million viewers for a race on FS1, especially with the Masters going on, which, by the way, the Masters were down this weekend, honestly, only being down a little bit from 2018 is honestly not that bad. Having over 2.3 million viewers on a cable channel is not that bad, all things considered. The race was very entertaining, I will give you that. I don't think the race was great. I think it had its entertaining moments for sure, and I think it kept people engaged. Obviously, I haven't seen the key demographic on what the numbers are for that, because I think that's a really key thing we need to look at, is that key demographic, how many people are tuning in. So I feel like the key demographic this season especially has been up a little bit compared to previous seasons. And it's going to be very interesting to see how Talladega goes, considering the ratings have been going down for Talladega recently. Though I do think with people talking about it like I've been talking about it, I do really hope the ratings for this weekend are up for Talladega. It's really interesting to see for sure. Hopefully the ratings do go up for Talladega this weekend. I'm not sure if they're going to, but I really hope for this weekend's race at Talladega they are able to go up so more people can go ahead and tune into the race. Nonetheless, decent ratings for the weekend. Not great, but 2.31 is not that bad for a cable race, all things considered. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cam Waters. As Cam Waters has confirmed yesterday that he will in fact be driving the 66 for ThorSport Racing at Kansas in the next few weeks. Cam Waters made his Truck Series debut a few weeks ago at Martinsville, where he actually was running in the top 10 and top 15 at points, but unfortunately crashed out and basically water came out of the truck. No pun intended. Cam Waters, of course, has won a lot of races in supercars, around 11 or 12 races, and Cam is wanting to run some select races. We actually heard some rumors, I believe, at the end of last year or going early into this year, that Cam Waters was supposed to make some select starts at RFK Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series this season in that number 60 car, that Stage 60 program. But because of the schedule that he has with supercars currently at the moment, I don't think that is going to be possible. Now, that being said, of course, he's fully focused on racing there this year, but we've obviously been seeing a transition where a lot of drivers from the supercar ranks have been coming over to NASCAR. We've seen Brody Kosecki make his debut at Indy last year. There's a chance he could make some runs because he's back with Erebus this year. And then we, of course, have Shane Van Gisbergen, who we're going to talk about later in this episode, who's looking to go full-time with Trackhouse Racing in 2025. Nonetheless, I'm excited to see that Cam Waters is back with ThorSport Racing in Kansas in a couple weeks. It's going to be a very big learning curve for him, but I think he will do a solid job. And again, I think it's just exciting to see him get the chance and opportunity once again to drive with ThorSport Racing at Kansas Speedway. We'll see how he ends up doing, and we'll see how he ends up performing. But again, good opportunity for him, and I hope he makes the best out of it with ThorSport Racing at Kansas in a couple of weekends. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill. As it was announced on Monday that Austin Hill will be driving the 33 for Richard Childress Racing at Kansas. This will be the second of 4 races that Austin Hill has scheduled for 2024, as Austin Hill did drive the number 33 last weekend at Texas Motor Speedway, but unfortunately Austin Hill ended up finishing in last place due to issues with the braking, and I think they had some power steering problems that cost them a chance and opportunity to continue. Now, Austin Hill's been okay at Kansas in the past in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but has not been great. But RCR's intermediate program, for the most part, has shown some pace and shown some speed. Now, obviously, I think the reason they're giving Austin Hill more starts is one, because United Rentals or Bennett is working with him for the 4 races this season. But 2, the reason is because I think they're trying to get him some Cup starts and getting him some Cup experience, because I think long-term Austin Hill is going to move up to the Cup Series in the next few years. Austin Hill, obviously, I think is inherited at number 3 car, whatever number they run, because Kyle Busch is going to be in the 8 car at least for the next few seasons. But Austin Hill, I think in the next couple years, inevitably is going to move up the Cup. And I think it happen as early as next year in 2025 if Austin Dillon decides to suddenly retire, or of course if in 2026 if Austin Dillon retires at the end of 2025. It's very interesting to see for sure. I wish Austin Hill the best of luck. I really hope he can make the best out of the start he has with the organization and team. I think he is a talented driver. I know some will disagree, but he's been a really good super speedway racer, and now we'll see if he has a chance and opportunity to compete on other types of tracks. Glad to see that he has a chance and opportunity to get back in the Cup Series, and we'll see if he can make the best out of it in his select starts this year, including next weekend at Kansas Speedway. We'll see how he ends up doing at Kansas. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about short tracks. Now, there's been a lot of talk and conversation about short track racing and the short track package. Now, according to Matt Weaver, NASCAR did meet with the teams over the weekend, and Denny Hamlin even mentioned this on his podcast, Actions Detrimental. And according to what Denny Hamlin said, NASCAR is focused on getting the tires fixed, but for whatever reason, they're not focused on fixing the horsepower issues. But they also have confirmed that they are not making any more aero changes to the next-gen car, which for short tracks, I don't know why they were focusing on aero in the first place, considering aero should not matter. Now, Joe Logano also spoke about the situation as well, and basically said that Kyle basically was really kind of surprised, and it was really wild to him that Kyle Larson said that this felt like an Indy car to an extent when it comes to the next-gen car. Let's go back to Denny Hamlin's comments, though, about the aero, basically the aero and stuff. Like I said a second ago, we should not be focusing on aero, and I'm glad to see that NASCAR has made a decision to not focus on aero because they're going 40, 45 miles an hour in the corner. Why do we need to focus on aero anymore? That made no sense to me. Glad to see that they're stopping on that. And I am glad to see that NASCAR is at least focusing on trying to fix the tires and getting more tire wear on this car because there's less load on the left rear tire on these cars than the previous Gen 6 car. So I'm glad to see the NASCAR is focusing on that front. But the other thing is the horsepower. And I've been saying this for a long time. This next-gen car on short tracks needs more horsepower. Because there's a good chance, a possibility, that if you add horsepower to these next-gen cars, you know what's also going to end up getting fixed? Basically the tire situation, because there's a good chance, a possibility that you're going to have more tire wear added if you add more horsepower to this car. I just don't understand why NASCAR can't go to one and they can't go to the other. In my opinion, you need to focus on both. You can't just focus on the tires and not horsepower. You need to focus on the tires and you need to focus on adding horsepower to the next-gen car. The biggest reason why they haven't done it, and I think it's obvious, is because parity, but the other reason is because of a new manufacturing potential coming in with Honda. People have been saying that Honda has wanted them to say it's 670, which again, I don't think the horsepower should really make a difference, but it sounds like the reason is because of the new manufacturer rumors where Honda might be coming in the next couple of years. To me, we need to not just focus on the tires. We need to focus on horsepower, and then the other big thing is we need to get rid of shifting in this car too. I think if they get rid of shifting in this next-gen car, which I think horsepower would play a big role in that, I think it would fix the short track racing overall because we shouldn't be shifting at short tracks. Why we're doing it at short tracks currently at the moment absolutely blows my mind. So there need to be major changes that are made to this next-gen car. There's obviously a lot of problems, and I do think there's some pretty big solutions that we can come up with. We need more horsepower in the car. I think we should try it, and obviously I think Ryan Blaney even said this during his media availabilities earlier this week, that they are going to probably try to do it at the All-Star race and try it out. So I really hope they do make some changes to this next-gen car going forward, and I hope they decide to go ahead and add at least a little more horsepower. Because I think if they added horsepower to this car, I think it would absolutely fix the racing product we have currently at the moment on the short tracks, because right now the short track racing is not acceptable, and I think everyone in the industry agrees with me that the horsepower is not acceptable on this car. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Blaney and Ryan Preece. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Texas, you saw the incident between Ryan Blaney and Ryan Preece. There was a crash happened with around 100 laps to go, and Ryan Preece had gotten in the back of Ryan Blaney after Ryan Blaney, it looked like, threw a pretty bad block. Now, Ryan Blaney did take responsibility for the incident in his media availabilities over the week. He didn't expect Ryan Preece to really get into him, but he at least took some responsibility for the wreck in an incident. To me, it did look like Ryan Preece did get in the back of Ryan Blaney for some of the onboard cameras that we're eventually to see later this week. But obviously, Ryan Blaney knows that you can't be over-aggressive at some of these types of tracks because there is a chance and possibility. Because Ryan Preece is someone that really isn't going to take BS from anybody. He's basically just ran in the back of him, and I think it was a little justified, unfortunately. I don't think it was justified that he got completely dumped and wrecked, but I think Ryan Blaney at least is admitting that he kind of expected and kind of saw it coming, even though he didn't agree with getting taken out completely. Now, do I think that Ryan Blaney and Ryan Preece are going to have issues going forward? Probably not, since Ryan Blaney is taking responsibility for the incident and the wreck. Again, he didn't expect to get completely shipped by Ryan Preece, but I think Ryan Blaney is one of these cool, calm manner guys most of the time, unless you hear him on the radio. You basically are not going to probably see him do anything too silly and too stupid going forward. Again, I'm not shocked and surprised about it to see that Blaney's taking responsibility because Ryan Blaney's kind of been a class act most of the time, unless you hear him speak to the media. Nonetheless, so I'm glad to see that he at least is admitting that he made a little bit of mistake getting into him. I think he's at wrong for the. I think he was at least in the wrong for that being Ryan Preece for shipping him in the corner. But I don't think Ryan Blaney disagrees that he was kind of at fault for the incident and the wreck. Nonetheless, I don't blame him for taking responsibility in the situation. And again, I don't expect things to happen going forward. A lot of wrecks happened at the track. A lot of drivers were taking some blame. We saw William Byron try to reach out to Ros Chastain, and Ros Chastain declined to talk to William Byron, which I hope they are able to talk at this upcoming race at Talladega, because they're going to have to work together, especially with the Chevys. But nonetheless, at least Ryan Blaney is taking responsibility for the situation and wreck, because I think there's some fault from him in his situation. I think there's some fault that goes to Ryan Blaney in when it comes to this situation. So nonetheless, I'm glad to see Ryan Blaney taking responsibility, and at least some fault coming from the Ryan Blaney camp, so I think he's at least at fault for this wreck a little bit. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Benedetto. Now, Steven Sub from Front Stretch very recently did an interview with Matt Benedetto, and there were some very interesting tidbits that came out from this interview. It sounds like that Matt Benedetto is going to be running more Xfinity Series races with Viking Motorsports. Remember, he was initially scheduled to run 5 Xfinity Series races with Viking Motorsports this season, but it sounds like they're going to be running more races in 2024. Whether that is 10 to 15 to 20 more races, that is still to be determined. Now, as of right now, it sounds like they're maybe going to change their mind on not running the road courses. There's a chance they could run the road courses later this year, but it isn't confirmed at this point. But Matt Benedetto also mentions that there is a chance and possibility that they're already planning toward 2025. So there is a chance that Matt Benedetto could drive for Viking Motorsports full-time in the 2025 season. Because SciAps is fully funding this car, to my understanding, Viking Motorsports. I think SciAps are really working with Matt Benedetto here. Matt Benedetto so far has made 3 starts of Viking Motorsports in the number 38 car this season, and so far he has scored, I believe, 2 top 20 finishes in that number 38 car, and I think he finished in the top 25 at Martinsville as well. When you consider that Matt Benedetto, in my opinion, always gets the best out of equipment. And then when you look at the previous driver that drove that number 38 car, that being, of course, CJ McLaughlin, Matt Benedetto was definitely an upgrade. And if they're looking to build up their program and get their program faster, Matt Benedetto is definitely the way to go. CJ McLaughlin failed to qualify for 2 of the races earlier this season. And they were really frustrated with CJ McLaughlin's performance, which is why they brought Matt Benedetto in the first place. And in my opinion, I think it was the right decision to bring him in to really build up the program. Now, obviously, what are the expectations for the rest of the season? I think ultimately for Matt Benedetto, I think the goal is to try to finish in the top 20 in the rest of the races that you do get to run. And if you do get top 20s and top 15s, that's going to help in the owner's points, because that's what he said in the interview as well with Steven Stump. He said they're trying to build up owner's points so they don't have issues missing races, especially because they're going to miss some races going forward. But if they continue to get top 15s and top 20s on a consistent basis, they're going to be in no jeopardy of going home anytime soon. They're kind of on the bubble going this weekend at the moment, but right now they're in a much better position going into this race than they would have been with a driver like CJ McLaughlin. And again, going toward 2025, I think he would would absolutely be the perfect driver to have for the 2025 season. I really hope they do go ahead and put him behind the wheel full time in the 2025 season, because I certainly think he would do a really good job with this organization in 2025. Hopefully, he gets a chance and opportunity with them full-time in 2025. We know there was a lot of rumors that he was going to drive this season for Cody Racing part-time. Obviously, funding fell through. But I think it's good to see that he's going to get the chance and opportunity to drive for them in the 2024 season for more races than originally scheduled. And I really hope he gets the opportunity to run with Viking Motorsports in the 2025 season, because I certainly believe he would do a really good job with them in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Cody Wear. As it was announced on Monday that Cody Wear is going to drive the 15 for SRX Racing this weekend at Talladega, making his first start in over a year with SRX Racing. I have my opinions on this. I understand why they're putting Cody Wear behind the wheel of the 15 car, because of course Cody Wear is the son of the owner, that being SRX Wear. However, I am not a big fan of Cody Wear getting this chance and opportunity. Number one, it's not because of what happened off the racetrack, but it's because of performance on the racetrack. Cody Wear, in my opinion, is not a very great race car driver. He had like a 27th place average finish, which to be fair is kind of similar to Kaz Grall's numbers. But Cody Wear, in my personal opinion, a lot of that was because of super speedway races, and a lot of the other races where Cody Wear was in the car, he crashed a lot. Now, granted, I do think he has a chance to survive in the carnage and maybe getting at least a decent finish, because Cody Wear, at least on the super speedways, can probably survive the carnage. But look, Kaz Gralla, in my opinion, should be in this car. And if not Kaz Gralla, you could have gotten someone else, like a Hailie Deegan perhaps, to get her Cup Series debut out of the way. You could have put Riley Herbst behind the wheel. Riley Herbst probably would have been competing for the win in the 15 car. You could have got Cole Custer perhaps. Or like I mentioned, you could have had Kaz Gralla behind the wheel. Or even Matt Benedetto, for that matter, would have been a better driver to put behind the wheel. Matt Benedetto won at Talladega 2 years ago. But because of the fact that Cody Wear is a son of SRX Wear, that's why he's getting this chance. And it's just disappointing to see, because I feel like SRX Racing, in a nutshell, they have been making a lot of really awesome and great moves, and their organization has been getting better. Justin Haley has been in the top 30 a lot of races this year, and they've been around the top 30 points all season long. And now all that positive momentum that SRX Wear has had in recent years, it feels like that they're starting to have major issues, and it feels like they're not taking things seriously. Because if they want to really be competitive, you wouldn't go with Cody Wear being behind the wheel. You would go with another driver like Matt Benedetto or even Hailie Deegan at this point, even though I think Cody Wear may be a little better than Hailie Deegan. I don't think he is, so let's be honest. But I personally think they could have gone with a veteran like Matty D or Kaz Gralla or Riley Herbst. That would have been who I would have behind the wheel. But I understand why they chose him, considering the fact that Cody Wear is the son of SRX Wear. Even though I don't fully agree with it, to be honest, I'm not completely shocked or surprised by this move. But I am disappointed in SRX Wear, because I do feel like that he shouldn't be behind the wheel of the seat. I personally do believe that it should be Matt Benedetto or Justin Haley, or not Justin Haley, or Kaz Gralla at this point. So I'm still disappointed. I'm not surprised by the move. We expected Cody Wear to be back, but I am a little disappointed to see that they're making this move, considering they got a lot of backlash and even muted some of the comments with the sponsor look. So again, I'm not surprised or shocked to see a lot of people frustrated with them, because they feel like that it's not the right move to put Cody Wear behind the wheel. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the charter agreement. Now, the charter agreement is one of the biggest stories currently going on in NASCAR, because everybody knows that the charter agreement is still not finalized at this point for 2025. But according to what Steve O'Donnell says, he says that they're very, very close to having the deal done. He didn't really go into more specifics other than that, but he did say that there's still some things they got to work on when it comes to the charter agreement. But he says that we are close to having a charter agreement done. An hour after this, Adam Stern reported that 3 people disagree with him that are very close to the charter situation, disagree with him, basically saying, what are you on about? We're not close to having a deal done at this particular moment. So when it comes to a charter agreement, they don't technically have to have the charter agreement done. Some have been saying they have to have it done by December 31st and January 1st of 2025. But Bragg has also disagreed with those comments. He said that they don't have to have the charter agreement and charter deal done until the Daytona 500, which is around February 14th or February 15th or something like that of 2025. So they technically still have about 9 to 10 months to get a charter deal done. But over the weekend, Jimmie Johnson spoke to media reporters, and he says they're probably not going to have a charter agreement done in the next few months. Because Jimmie Johnson, because he is an owner of Legacy Motor Club now, he's actually a part of those meetings when it comes to these deals. When I look at the situation here with the charters, I honestly am on the side of the teams. Because basically what is going on, there are two things, in my opinion, that are holding this charter agreement and basically the charter deal from being completely finalized. The first big thing that's holding up the charter agreement from getting officially done is basically the charters becoming permanent. NASCAR and GM France, on their side, they don't want the charter agreement to be officially permanent because they want more of an evergreen deal. The teams, they want the charter agreement to be completely permanent, and they want more money from the TV deal, which they are expecting to get more money. But that's the other big thing, is the TV revenue, how much percentage of the money they're going to get. We are expecting that the teams are going to get around 42 to 43% of the money, but the teams, they want half of the TV revenue. Where is that going to come out of? The tracks. The tracks are holding that side of the deal up from getting officially finalized, because especially SMI, even though we know from behind the scenes that SMI, it seems like they're basically not wanting to invest as much money in the tracks, it seems like, though they're still wanting a big share of the pie, because currently with the TV revenue split, it's 65% that goes to the tracks, it's 25% that goes to the teams, and it's 10% that goes to NASCAR. NASCAR is willing to give the teams a lot more money, but they're obviously, if they're wanting the charter agreement to be finalized, they're wanting a budget cap to come into play, which a lot of people that work in the industry feel like that they don't want that to happen because they feel like it would be a major detriment to the sport overall. To me, when it comes to the charter agreement, do I think it's going to get done? Yes, absolutely. I think that they are eventually going to get this charter agreement and charter deal finalized. But the big question is going to be, when is it going to get finalized? That's the big question right now at the moment. And to me, it's a really tough situation, right? Because I think we all want this charter agreement to get finalized, because if the charter agreement is not finalized, there is a possibility of a split, though I don't think that's going to happen. We've heard there could be some demonstrations that happen as well to show their frustration with the charter deal not getting done as well. I don't think there's going to be any protests. I don't think teams are just not going to show up at this point. But I do think that there is going to be some growing frustration. I think it's going to get done. I do think there's going to be some hurt feelings, unfortunately, when it comes to the charter agreement. But I do think it is eventually going to get done. It's going to have to get done for the sport's sake and for the future of the sport to be really, really good. I really hope they can get this finalized soon, because I think for the future of the sport, they've got to get this charter agreement done, because otherwise this sport could be in a really difficult future going forward. So I really hope they can get this finalized soon, and hope we can have the charters in place. I think it needs to be permanent for the sport to be in good shape, especially if how much the charters are. It'll be very interesting to watch as the time goes on. I do think it gets finalized, but I think it's going to be a bit before it's finalized. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. As Shane Van Gisbergen has a new sponsor for this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. That sponsor is going to be Wendy's. Wendy's is going to sponsor SVG in both the Cup Series race and the Xfinity Series race this weekend. First of all, I gotta say, the paint scheme looks absolutely phenomenal and really, really incredible. Obviously, we've heard reports that Wendy's was going to be working with SVG in some sort of capacity in 2024, but we weren't entirely sure what race they were going to be sponsoring Shane Van Gisbergen. But they're not only sponsoring in the Cup Series race, but also the Xfinity Series race as well. Shane Van Gisbergen, we all thought maybe Red Bull will come into play, maybe be a sponsor at some point this season. But it is really cool to see that Wendy's, one of the biggest fast food chains, is going to be working with SVG for this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. And I think that the cars absolutely look incredible, by the way. And it makes me very hungry, and it makes me want to get Wendy's and get that biggie bag. Obviously, SVG, there's been a lot of really hype around him so far in the 2024 season. You look at the performance he's had this year. He's gotten 1 top 5, 2 top 10s in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but let's be realistic and honest. SVG should probably have 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, probably a win at Circuit of the Americas, and obviously some other big, really big accomplishments. He's led a couple laps this year in Xfinity, of course, at COTA, and he's had a lot of top 20 finishes so far in the 2024 season. And you start thinking about the future for 2025, especially with this new sponsorship. You think about the potential of moving up next year in 2025, which I think is realistically really, really possible. Because I think that Shane Van Gisbergen, more than likely next season, is going to be in the Cup Series with Trackhouse Racing. And I think Trackhouse Racing is going to do whatever they can to move him up. So if I'm not mistaken, I think SVG has stated that recently. Their plan is to eventually move him up to the Cup Series full-time in 2025. And having more sponsorship coming into play is really exciting. And I really hope we see more sponsors, because we've seen WeatherTech come in and work with them in 2024 so far in a select number of races. Quadlock is sponsored for a race or two. Last week, Worldwide Express Group worked with him in the 97 team. And now you've got Wendy's, one of the biggest fast food chains, that is going to be working with him in 2024. And I really hope at some point this year, though I'm not entirely sure it's going to happen, but I really hope at some point that we see Wendy's come into play and work with him in 2024. It'd be really exciting to see, not Wendy's, Red Bull, come in and work with him in the 2024 season. I think it'd be really fun for him to have the chance and opportunity to work with Red Bull as a sponsor. But again, going back to the Wendy's stuff, I think it's phenomenal and great to see that Wendy's will be working with him this season. It's a great sponsorship for sure. I don't know if this is the only race they have scheduled for him in 2024 with the sponsorship. But again, certainly it is great to see a new sponsor work at SVG. Ultimately, I think the goal for this weekend is to go out there and try to win races. He's been decent in super speedways. You look at the performance on those tracks. He finished 11th at Daytona, finished 3rd at Atlanta, which Atlanta is now considered a super speedway. And I do think that SVG is going to have a very solid chance and a pretty good opportunity to be very competitive this weekend at Talladega. We'll see how he ends up doing, but again, it's just phenomenal and great to see that Shane Van Gisbergen will have a new sponsor this weekend for Talladega. I really hope he can make the best of it and have a strong run with his organization this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway with Colleague and, of course, Trackhouse working on that car. I think Trackhouse is preparing a 16 car this weekend, so we'll see how Shane Van Gisbergen can do this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway in the number 16 car. We'll see how his performance is and see how he ends up doing this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the SRX. Now, earlier this year, we had a lot of reports coming out the SRX was basically going to be at one point closing up shop. But about a week or two ago, we got a report that the Skip Barber Racing School was basically going to be purchasing and acquiring the SRX. Obviously, the guy who owns the SRX, Don Hawk, had recently been reported as, I think, director for the Skip Barber Racing School. And now it has basically been reports coming out, and Don Hawk put out a tweet on Monday, or Tuesday, I should say, that it looks like the SRX could potentially be making a comeback in 2024. He basically said, we should be bringing these back this year, basically indicating there's a chance, a possibility that the SRX might be making a comeback in some sort of capacity. And I also saw that Kenny Wallace even retweeted that as well and put the eye emoji indicating that he's also interested in racing in the SRX as well. If the SRX does in fact make a comeback in 2024, it would absolutely be huge and massive for the sport of SRX and racing altogether. And having the Skip Barber Racing School, which I think Skip Barber's group are the ones who really helped develop and worked on these cars. So people that work the SRX, I think, are part of that group currently at the moment. The reason that the SRX originally kind of shut down, unfortunately, is because of the fact they basically lost a lot of their funding. ESPN backed out, from my understanding, and also the other reason why they basically lost a lot of the other funding they sadly had going for them, and basically they just had a lot of cars that were broken. They couldn't keep up with the economy. But now with Skip Barber funding it, they can probably potentially come back. Now, what drivers could potentially they get in the Skip Barber Racing School because for this event in the SRS? Because obviously they're not probably going to get Tony Stewart at this point, because Tony Stewart's completely focused on the NHRA at this particular moment. Marco Andretti's fully focused on stock car racing, and he's going to run the Indy 500 this year. And a lot of Cup drivers might not be available. But you think about potential possibilities. What about Hailie Deegan? Hailie Deegan, obviously, she's focused full-time in racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but she's a pretty big superstar name, so she could be a potential possibility and a potential candidate. What about Chase Elliott, perhaps? Chase Elliott made some select starts with the SRX this year, last couple years, I should say. He could be a potential candidate. Kyle Larson, maybe. Kyle Busch, perhaps. You think about other drivers like Ryan Blaney. What about Ken Schrader coming back and running in the series? What about Tony Kanaan? What about other drivers, like, for instance, maybe Shane Van Gisbergen in one off or two? What about at this point, like a Carl Leverts coming out of retirement, or a Kurt Busch coming out of racing retirement, or someone else like, I don't know, Dillon Jr. or Jeff Gordon perhaps? Because I think you're going to try to get a lot of drivers that are retired to get in this series. Because I think Ken Schrader still has contact, and same with Kenny Wallace as well. And you think about potential racetracks. What about I-55 Raceway as a potential racetrack that they could go to? Again, going back to drivers, Brad Keselowski is someone to pick up, because that's the original reason why the series kind of lost interest, and why people lost interest in the SRX, because the ratings continue to drop and decline. But I think a lot of people would absolutely kill and love to see the SRX make a return. And again, I really hope they do bring the SRX back in 2024, because it sounds like they, like I said, it sounds like they are desperately trying to get the SRX back in the 2025 season, 24 season. I think they would love to be a full series again in 2025. But the big problem I think they're going to have is, what network would they go to if they were to make a return? I think Racing American Flow Racing would be the most likely options they go with at this point, considering I don't think ESPN would take them back. They breached that contract early after a multi-year deal. Maybe CBS picks them up again. Maybe even the CW. I thought about this, but what about the CW? The CW, obviously, they have a lot of big sports properties, and they're growing their brand. Hell, the Xfinity Series is going there a little bit earlier this year. We know that Xfinity probably more than likely is not going to be working. Xfinity is not going to be more than likely a title sponsor for the secondary series next season. So the big question at this particular point is, who's going to drive for the SRX if they make a return? And what other entities and what tracks do they go to? I-55 Raceway, possibly. They go to Thunder Road, the track that was promised to race, but because of the flooding that happened last year, they didn't go there. Maybe they go to Stafford. Maybe they go to Sebring at this point. They go to road course. It'd be very interesting if they did, in fact, go to a road course. Nonetheless, it's very interesting to see how things play out and what sponsors go where at this particular point and what drivers they get for the SRX. But it does sound like the SRX is trying to make at least some sort of comeback for 2025 or 24, and I really hope they can make a comeback some point in the 2024 season. It would be really exciting and fun to see them make a comeback. So, that is going to be our today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's go to above that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think the SRX is going to make a comeback? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all those stories to talk about today's episode, including SVG having a new sponsor? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm not sure if there's going to be more videos dropping on the channel today. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have a video talking about 10 drivers who could join the Cup Series in 2025. We're probably also going to have reactions to who wins the Xfinity Series poll for Talladega. And then on Saturday, we should have the Xfinity Series race suit for Talladega, along with reactions to Cup poll and an SVG video. And then Sunday, if the race does get rained out, there might be a special video dropping early in the morning, or there might be a Stewart Haas racing video dropping later in the day. Got a ton of great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.